Hundreds of patients screamed through the night. Some were kept in cages. Others were chained to their beds. They were beaten, starved, and forgotten. In the basement lay dozens of bodies, while doctors simply marked their deaths as numbers in a ledger. When Pennhurst State School and Hospital was finally shut down, it was already too late to ask how many souls were left behind. No one lives there now, but at night, people still hear footsteps, whispers, and the cries of those who never left. Before we descend into the story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me uncover more places where the past still lingers in the dark. Now, let's return to the story. At the start of the 20th century, Pennsylvania was growing fast. People believed in progress, in new medicine, in the idea that anyone could be fixed. Yet with that belief came fear. Fear of those who were different. Those who didn't fit the pattern of normal life were sent away to a place from which few ever returned, Pennhurst State School and Hospital. When the asylum opened its doors in 1908, officials called it a place of hope. They stood before its red brick walls, speaking of compassion and progress. But something else lived behind those walls from the very beginning. The air smelled of disinfectant, yet beneath it there was already the faint, metallic scent of fear. The first patients came from all over the state. Children, adults, the elderly, everyone society had decided not to see. They arrived with blank stares and trembling hands. Newspapers showed nurses smiling beside them, but those smiles faded within days. Patients multiplied, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, and soon it became clear Pennhurst was never meant for healing. It was built for keeping people out of sight. Beds were pushed tightly together, the air heavy and damp. At night, the corridors echoed with screams. Those who could not sleep were tied down. Those who disobeyed were locked away. Doctors stopped seeing people and began seeing numbers. Files replaced names. Every day turned into another experiment in endurance. The basements became places of shadow, wet, airless, silent. That was where they kept the difficult ones. Some thrashed and screamed. Others just stared into the dark, seeing things no one else could. A few whispered that voices spoke to them at night, not human voices, but who would ever believe the words of a madman? Over the years, the walls absorbed it all. Pain, fear, despair, like a sponge soaking up the human soul. Nurses spoke of feeling watched, of cold air moving behind them. During night shifts, they heard footsteps in empty halls, but management ordered silence. And so, Pennhurst became a prison, for bodies and for spirits. Whatever still lingers inside those walls now, it has nothing to do with medicine. Years passed. Pennhurst grew like a living organism, swallowing everyone thrown into its depths. The wards filled with screams, and the stairways groaned under the weight of stretchers pushed by orderlies. Most of the patients no longer had names, only numbers stitched onto their uniforms with metal tags. It wasn't only the mentally ill who were sent here. The blind, the deaf, the disabled, even children who simply acted different. Their only crime was not fitting in. Pennhurst took them all, without question, and devoured them whole. The staff was overwhelmed. One nurse for hundreds of patients. She was expected to do everything: feed, wash, restrain, medicate, and comfort. But the longer she worked there, the less human she became. Fear and exhaustion carved the compassion out of her until her hands moved automatically, without thought or empathy. Patients were left lying in their own filth and blood. They were beaten, sometimes by order, sometimes out of anger. The cries never reached the outside world. The thick brick walls absorbed them all. Those who survived would later speak of the basement rooms where bodies lay for days before being removed. In the reports, their deaths were marked as natural causes. After midnight, Pennhurst became eerily silent. Fog crept around the trees outside, and inside the air thickened. Heavy, still, suffocating. Nurses swore they saw doors close on their own, shadows shifting down empty corridors. They turned corners only to find nothing there. Sometimes the patients would sit up in the dark and weep silently, staring at something no one else could see. Whatever it was, they feared it more than death. Each night, the feeling grew stronger, as if the very building had begun to breathe, drawing in every ounce of despair it could find. Pennhurst was no longer a hospital. It had become a place where souls were broken, piece by piece. And when even the staff began to lose their sanity, no one could tell anymore who was the patient and who was just another ghost wandering these halls. By the 1960s, Pennhurst had already earned its dark reputation. Locals avoided the place, saying even the air around the hospital smelled of rot. But inside, life continued, the same endless cycle of suffering that had lasted for decades. Only now, the walls had begun to speak louder. The first cracks appeared when a young employee who had worked there for less than a month suddenly fled. He was found days later in a nearby town. He couldn't explain what he had seen, only that the night there isn't like any other night. He trembled even in daylight when he spoke of it. Soon after, journalists began asking questions, at first quietly, then louder. In 1968, NBC aired a documentary called "Suffer the Little Children." For the first time, cameras showed what had always been hidden behind the tall brick walls. People sitting naked in the dark, eyes hollow and unfocused. Children tied to beds. Hallways that looked more like torture chambers than hospital wards. The world saw the horror that had been ignored for decades. And though most people turned away, those who watched closely felt something else. That the horror wasn't purely human. There was a presence in those images, as if the building itself was watching back through the lens. After the broadcast, investigations began. Officials demanded inspections. Activists protested, but the staff said little. They were afraid. One orderly later confessed he had seen the door to the isolation ward swing open by itself during a night round. And from the darkness emerged the figure of a patient who had died days before. "He just walked past me," the man said, "and vanished into the wall." Well, when investigators finally reached the basement, they found what had been hidden for years. Rusted shackles still bolted to the walls. Ledgers filled with the names of the long dead. Dozens of small objects, toys, shoes, faceless photographs. No one could explain why they were kept. Pennhurst could no longer be defended. The truth was too loud, too cruel. But even as the first patients were transferred out, the building seemed to resist being emptied. Guards reported hearing crying at night. And in the vacant rooms, they swore they could hear someone breathing. For the first time, the world saw what truly lived inside those walls. But whatever haunted Pennhurst had no intention of leaving with the living. In 1987, Pennhurst State School and Hospital was officially closed. Courts, reports, and television broadcasts had finally done their work. The state admitted what many had known for decades. Pennhurst had become a symbol of cruelty. But when the last patients were taken away in trucks, the building didn't feel empty. Its windows seemed to watch, like eyes that refused to close. The security guards who stayed behind to protect the grounds later said that the first few weeks after the closure were the worst. Every night, they heard noises, slamming doors, echoing footsteps, whispers that moved through the halls. One guard quit after he saw a shadow sliding along the wall beside him, matching his steps, but walking the other way. Over time, weeds overtook the grounds, yet something else seemed to seep through the cracks. Memory. Neighbors claimed that lights flickered inside the old wards, even though the power had been cut long ago. Sometimes, they said, they could hear children laughing, until the sound stopped all at once. One night, a group of paranormal investigators arrived to capture evidence. Their cameras caught movement where no one was standing. Microphones picked up a sudden cold breath passing by the lens. On one tape, a voice could be heard, faint, broken, almost pleading, "Don't close the door." When a local TV crew stayed overnight to film, one of their cameras recorded the face of a child in a third-floor window. The image made headlines the next day. But within a week, the station retracted the story, calling it a recording error. Those who had seen the raw footage swore it was no mistake. After its closure, Pennhurst became a pilgrimage site for thrill seekers. Teenagers sneaked in at night to test the legends. Some didn't return until morning, pale, silent, shaken. A few said they'd lost time, that hours had vanished. Others claimed they heard their own names whispered directly into their ears, though they were completely alone. Even now, though the asylum stands abandoned, those who enter say it breathes. The corridors fall quiet when someone walks in, but then begin to whisper again. Some doors refuse to stay closed, and when the wind passes through the shattered windows, it doesn't just carry the chill of the past, it carries voices. Voices of those still waiting to be released. More than 20 years had passed since Pennhurst was shut down. The buildings were blackened by damp and rot, the stairs covered in dust and mold. Yet inside, everything remained as it had been. Rusted beds, old stretchers, lockers with names long erased. It looked as though the asylum was simply waiting for someone to open its doors again. In 2008, a group of documentary filmmakers received permission to film on the grounds of the former institution. Their goal was to tell the story of human cruelty, honestly, without embellishment, without myths. But what they captured left them silent. From the first hours, there was a pressure in the air. Cameras malfunctioned, batteries drained, audio warped. One cameraman claimed he felt someone standing behind him, but when he turned, nothing. They decided to stay overnight in one of the main wards, hoping to record the sounds of the night. At 3 a.m., one of the cameras positioned in a hallway caught movement. In the grainy footage, a shadow slowly emerged from the far end of the corridor, moving toward the lens before the video abruptly cut off. At that exact moment, another camera in a different wing captured the sound of a child's laugh. After that, one member of the team, the sound engineer, refused to continue. He said that when he put on his monitoring headphones, he heard someone whispering his name. The whisper repeated several times until he tore the headphones off. The next morning, they discovered faint handprints on a wall in one of the old wards. Small, childlike, as if someone had touched the dust not long ago. But the building had been locked all night, and only the team leader had the key. As the crew packed their equipment to leave, one camera left running on the stairwell continued to record. In its final seconds, the door at the end of the hall creaked open by itself, and a dark figure stood motionless in the center of the corridor. Then, without warning, the footage stopped. As if someone had pressed stop. When the editors reviewed the material back at the studio, they noticed something strange. Several audio files were recorded backward. When reversed and slowed down, a faint voice emerged. Weak, trembling, but unmistakable. "We're still here." After the documentary about Pennhurst was released, the country fell silent for a while. Television programs replayed the horrifying footage. Experts debated whether it was editing, psychological suggestion, or something truly supernatural. But along with the skepticism came something else: new testimonies. The first to speak were former employees of the asylum. Some, after decades of silence, finally confessed what they had seen. One elderly orderly said that during night shifts, he often heard someone singing lullabies from empty wards. Sometimes he entered those rooms and saw a bed slowly rocking, as if someone had just gotten up. Another witness, a nurse, claimed that in the final months before Pennhurst closed, new rooms began to appear. "They just appeared," she said. "One day, a door would open, and there was a ward none of us had ever seen before. The next day, it was gone." After the film's release, the abandoned hospital became a magnet for visitors, researchers, tourists, ghost hunters. Most stayed only a few hours, but some spent the night inside. One of them, a local newspaper reporter, returned the next morning pale and silent. His notebook was found later near the main entrance. There was only one sentence written inside: "They don't want to be remembered." Soon, photographs began to surface online. Blurred shapes in windows, figures caught in doorways, faint handprints in the dust. Most people dismissed them as tricks of light, but those who had been there said light doesn't breathe. Even the nearby residents began to complain. On windy nights, they heard singing coming from the direction of the asylum, a cold, monotone chant, like a children's choir. Sometimes there were sharp metallic sounds, like chains being pulled across the floor. A few months after the film's release, one of the investigators involved in its production disappeared. His car was found half a mile from Pennhurst, keys still in the ignition. Inside was a single unlabeled cassette. When it was played, the recording contained nothing but faint breathing, and then a whisper repeated over and over again: "We're still here." Today, Pennhurst looks different. Part of the property has been turned into a museum, another part into a tourist attraction. Every fall, crowds arrive for the haunted asylum, a theatrical event where actors play ghosts and patients, and visitors pay to be scared. But those who work there say not every sound heard at night comes from the show. Some scenes have become a little too real. Several employees have reported seeing figures in old hospital gowns that weren't part of the performance. They would appear at the far end of corridors, standing perfectly still, watching, until someone noticed them. Then they would simply vanish. One lighting technician swore he saw a little girl standing beside a bed, whispering softly. When he approached, the room was empty. Visitors who come just for fun often leave quiet and pale. They say the air inside feels different, thick, cold, and heavy. Some feel nauseous. Others start crying without reason. Guides explain it as emotional response, but not everyone agrees. One man who stayed overnight on a private tour said he woke to the sound of children laughing. In the darkness, he saw a glow, not a flashlight, but a light coming from deep within the corridor. Then he heard a voice. "Will you stay too?" He was taken out the next morning, trembling and unable to speak. Security cameras have captured movement in sealed-off sections of the building. When guards go to check, there's no one there. Sometimes footsteps echo from empty rooms, and by morning, doors that were locked tight stand open, with no sign of forced entry. Former investigators claim Pennhurst isn't just a ruin anymore. It's an open wound. They say everyone who enters leaves a piece of themselves behind. Some employees admit to having recurring dreams, the same every night. Faceless patients, endless corridors, and voices begging them not to leave. Locals no longer react with surprise. They say Pennhurst has a life of its own. Quiet, slow, but alive. And when the tourists leave and the lights go out, something inside keeps moving. A place forgotten by people has not forgotten itself. More than a century has passed since Pennhurst first opened its doors. Thousands of people entered those halls, and most of them never truly left. Today, it's spoken of as a relic of history, yet some stories never learn how to end. The building still stands. Cracks split across its brick walls like old wounds, and through them, something still seeps, something alive, or something that only pretends to be. Inside, the air smells of damp, dust, and time itself. But if you stand very still, you can hear something else, a faint breath, rising and falling from the walls, the floor, and the darkness beneath the stairs. Few come here now without cameras. Photographers, historians, ghost hunters, all searching for proof. Yet with every new photograph, there come more questions. Faces appear where no one stood. Footsteps echo in empty rooms. And on every recording, the same sound returns. A soft, drawn-out inhale. Some call Pennhurst cursed. Others say it simply hasn't forgotten its own. Everyone who lived, suffered, and died within these walls left behind something. A scream, a thought, a trace of fear. All of it merged into one voice, a single consciousness that now speaks for the place itself. At night, when the moon rises over the hills, its light touches the windows, making them look like eyes. Some swear they've seen movement reflected in them. Others hear crying, not loud, but muffled and distant, as if coming from deep underwater. Yet when anyone dares to approach, it all stops. Only the wind moves the torn curtains, like someone turning away. What remains of the asylum is guarded now, but guards rarely stay long. After a few nights, most quit. Some leave without explanation. Those who remain say the scariest thing about Pennhurst isn't the shadows or the sounds. It's the feeling that you are never truly alone. Sometimes, it feels as if the very ground beneath the building is breathing, that the breath remembers names, and that anyone who speaks the word Pennhurst is already being heard.